Welcome to our deep dive into the life and world of Paul Hindemith.
A major figure of 20th century music.
Certainly. And, we have so much to explore. Biography, of course, how his musical styles evolved over time, and his relationship with the Nazi regime.
Not to be overlooked.
Absolutely. And, of course, we'll also be looking at his theoretical work.
And how that shaped his legacy and his influence on music today.
Exactly. So our mission here in this deep dive is to get to the heart of Hindemith's journey.
To understand the man behind the music.
Right. The personal stories, the evolution of his voice, how his life experiences shaped his creative path.
It's fascinating to see someone like him involved in so many different aspects of the musical landscape. He wasn't just a composer.
Let's start at the beginning.
Hanau, Germany, his birthplace.
Right. And then his musical education.
At Dr. Hoche's Conservatorium in Frankfurt. Violin, conducting, composition.
But it wasn't all just conservatory studies,
He played in dance bands early on.
Imagine that. The future composer of some very serious music, honing his skills in that kind of environment.
I think that speaks to his versatility even then.
Doesn't it? And then, of course, he progressed to the Frankfurt Opera Orchestra, became concertmaster in 1916.
Quite an achievement at such a young age.
Very talented violinist.
Yeah.
And then you see his dedication to chamber music, emerging. Second violinist in the Rebner String Quartet.
Immersed in the string quartet repertoire.
Absolutely. And of course, World War I happened.
Frontline service.
It must have been an incredibly formative experience. I mean, how do you think that kind of experience, the realities of war, would affect a young musician?
I think war has a profound effect on artists, often leading to shifts in their expression, how they see the world. And for someone like Hindemith, already so deeply involved in music, that experience on the front lines must have been very formative, maybe contributing to some of the intensity and seriousness we find in his later works.
It makes you think about how these experiences, these external forces, shape an artist's work.
Absolutely.
Even if they're not always explicitly depicted, the impact is there. So after the war, we see him actively forging his career.
Founding member of the Weimar Quartet in 1921, viola player.
Interesting choice, right? Shifting from violin to viola.
His brother Rudolf played cello in the quartet as well.
Family affair. And this quartet, they toured extensively throughout Europe, championing contemporary music.
Putting him at the forefront of musical innovation in the post-war era.
Definitely.
Yeah.
A performer, a composer, an advocate for new music, all at the same time. And then in the 1920s, we see his own distinctive style emerging.
Described as leaner, contrapuntally complex.
Aligned with the Neue Sachlichkeit movement.
New objectivity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
His camera music series is a great example. Neo-Bachkian spirit, going back to those Brandenburg concertos.
Hilarity, objectivity, functionality.
Such a crucial period in his development. I mean, what drove this shift towards a more objective style?
Well, the Neue Sachlichkeit movement was, in part, a reaction against late Romanticism and Expressionism.
Which were seen as overly emotional.
Exactly. And so Hindemith's music, with its emphasis on clarity and form, really fit in with this movement.
And the connection to Bach is really interesting, isn't it?
It is. The contrapuntal writing, the formal clarity of the Baroque era, those became important touchstones for him.
A move away from pure emotionalism toward something more structured, more intellectual.
Perhaps.
At the same time, he was building a career as a teacher. 1927. Professor at the Berliner Hochschule for music.
Very prestigious.
Performer, composer, educator. This is a man deeply engaged in all facets of the music world.
It's incredible how multifaceted his career was.
It really is. But of course, we can't ignore the historical backdrop.
The rise of the Nazi regime.
Casting a shadow over everything, his wife was part Jewish.
Which created increasing difficulties for them.
Ultimately leading to their emigration.
First to Switzerland in 1938 and then to the United States in 1940.
Forced to leave their home, their careers. Imagine the emotional toll of that.
It's hard to fathom.
Starting over in a new country.
A new language.
A new culture.
The impact of such a displacement on an artist's work can be profound.
Absolutely. And when he arrived in the United States, he started teaching at Yale, 1940. And he founded the Yale Collegium Musicum.
Always involved in education and performance.
Committed to those aspects. He became a U.S. citizen in 1946. But it's interesting, he never truly severed ties with Europe.
In 1953, he returned.
Settled in Zurich, teaching at the university there until his retirement in 1957.
And in his final years, he focused on conducting and recording his own compositions,
making sure his musical vision was preserved.
leaving behind definitive interpretations.
He passed away in Frankfurt in 1963 from pancreatitis.
A long and complex life.
It really was. Let's delve deeper into his musical world now. As we said, his compositional style went through some significant changes.
From late Romanticism and Expressionism to the Neue Sachlichkeit.
And then towards a more orchestral focus in his later works.
His harmonic language is particularly fascinating.
Fundamentally tonal. But he freely used all 12 notes of the chromatic scale within his tonal framework.
He detailed this system in his treatise, The Craft of Musical Composition.
It must have sounded so unique at the time. What do you think audiences would have heard?
Well, he wasn't abandoning tonality altogether, but he was pushing its boundaries, incorporating all these chromatic elements, creating a soundscape that was both familiar and surprising, grounded in tonality, but with a sense of constant harmonic motion.
So it was both accessible and challenging.
I think so.
And he always emphasized the importance of a foundational tone, a point of stability.
He also drew a lot from Baroque and classical forms and counterpoint.
This combination of tradition and innovation is really striking, isn't it?
It is. He wasn't afraid to embrace the past while also looking forward.
Those traditional structures almost gave him a framework to build upon, a foundation for his more modern harmonic exploration.
And they provided listeners with a point of reference, something familiar to hold on to amidst all the new sounds.
Absolutely. And we should talk about his concept of Gebrauchsmusik, music for use.
Music with a social or political purpose, often designed to be performed by amateurs.
The Planer Musiktage, Wir bauen eine Stadt. It's a really interesting idea, isn't it?
No.
What do you think were the motivations behind this?
I think it reflects a desire to make music more accessible, to bring it into the community, make it relevant to everyday life.
To break down those barriers between composer, performer, and audience.
Exactly.
And then in the 1930s, he shifted towards larger orchestral works. The opera Metamorphosis is a great example,
And the symphony derived from it.
which became one of his most frequently performed pieces.
It's powerful, enduring music,
It makes you wonder if the themes of Metamorphosis resonated with his own experiences.
dealing with the life of Matthias Grunewald, a Renaissance painter living through a time of upheaval.
Parallels to Hindemith's own situation with the rise of Nazism.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, his symphonic metamorphosis of themes by Carl Maria von Weber, a testament to his skill in adapting existing material and making it his own.
A brilliant combination of respect for the source material and his own unique voice.
Vibrant, masterfully orchestrated. No wonder it's still so popular.
A true classic.
And even in his later works, like the Symphony in B-flat for concert band, you still see that mastery of counterpoint.
A constant thread throughout his music.
His relationship with the Nazi regime was so complicated. At first, there was some inconsistency in their attitude towards him.
They condemned some of his earlier works, calling them degenerate. But later, they thought maybe his more tonal music could represent a new kind of modern German music.
Rooted in tradition.
It shows you how they were struggling to define what acceptable German art was in the modern era.
But any hope of reconciliation was shattered in 1934.
Joseph Goebbels denounced him publicly.
Calling him an atonal noisemaker. That's a turning point, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. By 1936, his music was banned.
And then he was included in that infamous Intertet music exhibition. Degenerate music.
A deliberate attempt to humiliate and discredit him.
To silence his voice.
It must have been devastating.
It's important to remember that Wilhelm Furtwängler publicly defended Hindemith.
A very respected conductor at the time. He argued that Hindemith was a true German composer.
He was an act of courage, but ultimately futile.
The Nazi regime wouldn't be swayed.
And of course, all of this contributed to his decision to emigrate.
To escape persecution.
Hindemith was more than just a composer, though. He was a serious music theorist as well.
His treatise, The Craft of Musical Composition, is a major work.
3 volumes detailing his unique tonal system, ranking intervals, classifying chords.
He even advocated for melodic rating that avoided clear major or minor triads.
A complex system, to be sure.
Right.
What was he trying to achieve with all of this?
I think he was trying to build a more comprehensive understanding of tonality, going beyond traditional analysis, expanding the possibilities.
He truly believed in his system.
He applied it to all kinds of music, from Gregorian chant to contemporary works.
His piano work, Ludus is a great example of his theory in action.
Fugues, interludes, exploring different tonal centers based on his system.
And despite all this complexity, he still held on to the traditional idea of dissonance resolving to consonance.
Those fundamental principles of musical tension and release were still important to him.
His impact on music education was huge, especially at Yale, where his theoretical works became required reading.
He shaped a whole generation of musicians.
Lucas Foss, Norman Della even Werner von Braun were his students.
That's quite a diverse group.
It speaks to the breadth of his influence, I think.
He wasn't just training composers, he was training thinkers.
People who could apply his systematic approach to any field.
Fascinating.
Hindemith is considered one of the most important German composers of his time, and his influence wasn't limited to Germany.
He even played a role in reorganizing music education in Turkey.
And helped establish the Turkish state opera and ballet.
Young Turkish musicians held him in very high regard.
His ideas resonated internationally.
Truly a global figure.
And in his later years, conducting and recording his own works, he had this knack for making performers understand exactly how his music should go.
He was shaping the performance tradition of his own works,
leaving a clear legacy for future generations. And his contributions were recognized with prestigious awards.
The Wihuri Sibelius Prize, the Balzan Prize.
A fitting tribute to his achievements.
Absolutely.
Looking back at his life, at his work, it's clear that Paul Hindemith was a man of immense talent and conviction.
He faced incredible challenges.
But his musical voice never faltered.
It evolved, but it always remained his own.
He was a true innovator, a dedicated educator, a champion of music for everyone.
He leaves behind a complex and fascinating legacy.
A legacy that continues to inspire and challenge us today.
He showed us that music can be both deeply personal and broadly relevant.
That it can reflect the complexities of our world.
And offer solace and meaning in difficult times.
His life story, his music, makes you think about the power of art to transcend boundaries.
To connect us across cultures and time.
To speak to the human experience in a universal language. And it makes me wonder, how do the inner convictions of an artist interact with the external pressures of their time?
How do these forces shape their creative path and ultimately determine their lasting impact on the world?
A question worth pondering.
Indeed.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the life and work of Paul Hindemith.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep listening, keep questioning.